Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Eric with Mind Melt Podcast, and today we've got a really exciting interview for you. We're going to be talking with Dr. Stephen Novella. Dr. Stephen Novella is a neuroscientist who wrote a really amazing book called A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. He also hosts a podcast called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and his book is so good. I mean, I cannot rave enough about it. It is about just basically thinking rationally, thinking critically, and not taking the world at face value, because oftentimes when we do that, we are fooled. We have, pattern-seeking behaviors, and it's amazing how easy it is to fool ourselves. We're probably the easiest people to fool as ourselves. So, I am so honored to be able to talk to Dr. Novella. I hope that you enjoy this conversation. We got into a lot of good stuff. I wish we could get into more because there's so much that I really want to talk to him about, but I was lucky enough to be able to talk to him with a 3-hour time difference, and so for him it was like 9 o'clock at night over on the East Coast, and he was very patient with me as I just threw craziness at him, and it was great to talk to him. So if you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to pick up his books. It's available wherever books are sold. A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And he just talks about, how easy we fool ourselves. And I think that you'll really enjoy his book, really enjoy his podcast. Be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoy this podcast, you can do us a solid and just give us a 5-star review on Stitcher or iTunes. Let us know what you think. Without any further ado, it's Stephen Novella. Thanks. Bye. I'm here with Dr. Novella, Steve Novella. And I just finished your book, which was really awesome. I think that it's really important to have, skeptical handbooks out there, especially right now. There's a lot of misinformation running around. I guess it's not a new thing, though, right? It's kind of been around. Misinformation's been out there forever.
Yeah, I think it's been around for as long as it's been information. So basically forever.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is what you think is causing this uprise in the flat earth conspiracy. That's kind of a new phenomenon, and amongst other conspiracies that are going on, but it seems like conspiracy theories are just ramping up in their craziness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question everyone's asking. I don't know that I have any definitive answer. It certainly seems like social media has been very disruptive. It allows for people to spread all information, good, bad, whatever, very quickly, in real time, practically, and without any editorial filter or really much of a hurdle, right? Anybody with computer access can go on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and they're part of the conversation. They're getting their information out there. So conspiracy theories can spread a lot faster. There's really no hindrance to them, and these things again. These have always been there. And again, what's interesting is that when the printing press became popular, people were concerned that people could just print any opinions they want and spread them with in pamphlets. It was the same sort of disruptive technology. And then things sort themselves out eventually, and I think we will reach, a new kind of equilibrium. Of course, there may be other disruptive technologies coming down. Who knows? Can't predict the future, but
yeah,
I think it's just this is human nature. This is psychology. These things have always been there. Yeah, things have kind of exploded recently because social media has exploded everything.
Right.
But there are forces of enlightenment spreading as well.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like, I don't know if you're familiar with Mick West. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had him on the podcast yesterday, and one of the things that I was talking to him about, it's like I live in northern Idaho, and it is extremely regressive up here. There's, a lot of, it's just very behind the times, I guess you can say. And there's a lot of religion up here, and there's not much secularism up here. It's a really interesting place to live, especially for someone like myself who's not like that at all. And so one of the things I got this new guy that we just hired on working for us. I'm working at a cabinet shop, and we just hired on this new guy, and he's a flat earther. And, I've known of this phenomena for a while now. And I, at one point in time, kind of never thought about the flat earth, but I definitely thought like 9/11 was an inside job and JFK was possibly, conspiracy. But regardless of that, so we hired this guy on, and he's a fundamentalist Christian, and he's also a flat earther. And I started to think a lot about it, and it seems like with the flat earth, it's so outlandish. Like it is, in order to believe that, you have to believe that every facet of science is, wrong, and that everybody's in on this big grandiose lie. And I think that it's because as we get more and more technologically advanced, and we get more and more science minded, and we learn more about the state of consciousness and evolution and things like that, it's getting harder and harder for religion to stick its foot in the door, And so in order for people to continue being religious and like believing these, beliefs, they have to basically say everything else is a lie, because, you can't have both. You have to have one or the other when you're a fundamentalist. So in order for you to remain a fundamentalist, it's like you have to basically say that everything is a lie, the whole science is fake, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. It's a feature, not a bug, right? The idea that they have to deny all of science, that's actually the goal, in my opinion. It's not so much that the earth is flat, like that in and of itself is so important. It's that if that is true, if the earth is flat, if we've been deceived about something so fundamental as the shape of the earth for centuries, then you can disbelieve anything, right? Then all of science is out the door. That's actually the goal of that belief system, is the rejection of all authority, all expertise, all science. It is the all-consuming conspiracy theory that essentially lets you believe whatever it is that you want to believe, because there is no evidence, there are no facts, nothing is real. The earth is flat. That's the end game, right? Conspiracy. That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing because, I'm more of a materialist, and I don't believe, I don't really believe in anything. I guess I think things are more and less likely, probably. And I think it's more likely that it's just, state of consciousness is a byproduct of neurobiology. And so I tend to think that, like when I look at life and I look at the experience that we're having, it's so bizarre and beautiful, and it's the mystery, and it's so incredible that to throw in this whole other monkey wrench into the wheels of, like we're being lied to, and, God and all this craziness. It's like taking away from this really beautiful accident, basically. And it makes me kind of bummed out because, I have another friend who's a flat earther, and he talked to me about this like a year or two ago. And he was trying to say that I was afraid to admit, that the government's lying to us. Like I was afraid of that. Like I was afraid that, like I was living in fear, and I just was going along with the mainstream story because I'm too afraid to come to the realization that this is all big lie. And I'm like, man, I don't want to point fingers, but it's like to live this way of the government is pulling this big conspiracy over on us. That to me is almost more of a fear, because you're trying to have an answer for everything. Because if you have a conspiracy, then when you look at the Big Bang, you're like, well, that's a lie. And and you look at evolution, that's a lie. Dinosaurs, that's a lie. So everything's a lie. So all of a sudden you have an answer for everything. Everything's a lie, and everything's a conspiracy. And it's like all of a sudden now you have the answer, so you can't sit there and ponder the real tough things, like, what was there before the Big Bang, or what was it that materialized biology, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's almost this kind of this way of allowing yourself to not deal with the fear of death, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get too sidetracked trying to psychoanalyze true believers. I mean, we do want to know psychologically how people tick, right? How we come to the conclusions that we do, and how we maintain our beliefs and deny facts and science, like how reason goes awry. You know, we do want to know that, but when it comes to like individual people and their beliefs, um, saying things like, well, you're afraid, or you're doing this because you fear death, or that doesn't get you, whether it's true or not, it doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right.
And of course, when people turn that around against you, how do you feel? Like when he says, oh, you're afraid to admit the government's lying, that gets nowhere. So I don't think that that's a good strategy.
You're
rhetorically.
absolutely right. That's what I would never use that in the discussion. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I definitely would never try to use that in the discussion. I'd probably more so just point out like the interest.
But it's also so much more complicated than that. I don't think it's really,
Sure.
it's not that insightful or meaningful to say that. I think it's better to try to understand like how people form narratives, what purpose those narratives serve for them in terms of their worldview, their ability to comprehend, a complicated world, and how they get stuck in those narratives, and to think about maybe how to get people out of them, or to look at things in a different way. And it's not easy. There's no formula for it, but we do know what doesn't work. And there are some strategies that at least have the potential to work. You also have to accept there's nothing you could do that will guarantee that you could show somebody else reality. You know what I mean? That if they're not ready or willing or able to step outside of their cocoon, their belief system, there's nothing you could do about it. You could, it's like the cliche, you can lead a horse to water. Yeah, that's all you could do is say, well, listen, this is what I believe. This is why I believe what I believe. I think, you could try to talk around it, try to nibble around the edges, give them some critical thinking skills, usually when not directly confronting their identity, right? The thing that they care the most about. And they're either going to apply it to themselves or they're not. And that's that last little bit that you have no control over.
Right.
Right. You just sort of hand them the tools or show them, there's the tools over there. You could use them if you want to. There you go. But they have to pick them up and use them. There's nothing you could really do to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you for myself, like 3 years ago, I was addicted to drugs. And when I was stuck in this like totally different life that I'm in than right now. And when I finally did bring myself to get clean, I wanted to understand, because what it was is I was doing amphetamines. So it was like I wasn't sleeping at all really for long periods of time, like 2 or 3 days sometimes, and I started to have auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and like I developed this whole entire script of what I thought was going on. I thought I was being chased. It's just a crazy story. But when I finally got myself to get clean and, get out of that state of mind, I was like really amazed at how my like the depths of your consciousness, I guess, like where you can get to, And so I started to analyze it, and I kind of, I've taken some classes like neuroscience classes and neurobiology classes and stuff like that. And just started to really like look at it in a different way, like kind of observe, I guess, where I was at and what caused me to get there, and like the science behind what was going on. And it's just amazing. And then that's like, with behavioral biology, just like learning what happens with the, prefrontal cortex, and how it kind of helps with long-term planning and how you handle situations, especially with fear. And I don't know, it's just really amazing to look at it from this scientific perspective and realize what was going on. And I mean, I don't even know totally what was going on, obviously, because I wasn't being studied or something at that point of time. But I've taken Robert Sapolsky's behavioral biology class, and I feel like I learned, just from doing that, I learned so much about what was going on in my state of mind. And now it's really interesting because I look at like little things like food cravings very similar to it,
Mm-hmm.
and just how you have all these different influences that drive your biology. And it's just really interesting. I don't know. It's really interesting when you take a step back and look at how many different factors there are just in developing your motivations. So
Yeah, in a way, I think it's empowering to have at least a rudimentary understanding of neurobiology. The realization that we are our brains, and our brains is just a bag of chemicals. It's neurons firing. It's basically an information processing machine that has evolved to create behavior that makes us more likely to survive and pass on our genes. I don't think that diminishes the human experience at
not at
all.
all.
Yeah, I mean, we're human. I'm a human being. That's what I am, and I fully embrace that. And it's a scary and wonderful thing at the same time. But if you think that we're some kind of magical creature, then you have like no hope of understanding something like drug addiction.
Right.
And I think, at least for you, it seems like it's helped you sort of transcend that. It's like,
Oh yeah.
I'm a bag of chemicals. I'm not going to fall down that pitfall, because that's, drugs are chemicals that are going to alter my brain and alter how I perceive reality, et cetera. And they're going to encourage me to, drug seeking behavior, whatever. So I do see that to some degree, and this is, I think, a fundamental spectrum out there of people, right? There's different people to different degrees are either just coasting, right? They are passively following their psychology, their neurochemistry, or they're trying to get on top of it to some degree,
Right.
which may be an illusion, but it doesn't even really matter, right? You're at least you're self-examining, right? You're examining your own thought processes, your own feelings, your own behavior, trying to get outside of it and to exert some kind of top-level control over the course of your life. Otherwise, you're just a ship that's going down the current, and you have no way of controlling where you're going.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, I think that if you understand that you are just the biological responses to whatever's motivating you, whether it be food or shelter, whatever it is, then, and you try to get on top of that, then, being healthy, eating good food, not, overdoing caffeine, not smoking cigarettes, like when you start to take control over those little things, even if it isn't really, it is just an illusion, consciously being aware of the situation that you're putting your body into, I think can really help, at least with the self-awareness aspect of it, because when you're, just running off of caffeine and running off of cigarettes and, your life is, you're not even really living. You're just, at that point, you're not even observing life, because you're just going through at least with the other thing, you can observe life a little bit while you're here.
Right.
So I heard you talking, I think it was like a science or a doctor conference or something, and I thought it was you that said meditation is kind of like whack.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with meditation is that it's not really well defined. So basic principle of science, you can't really study something unless you define it in a very specific way. You have to know what it is you're talking about. My problem with the meditation research is that it's not really operationally defined. I don't know what it is. When somebody says meditation does this or does that, I don't know what they're talking about. There's some attempt to drill down at least one level deeper to look at the components that may be making up meditation, right? So this is where it gets really tricky. In anything like neurological, psychological, there are things we experience, but that's not necessarily a fundamental phenomenon. And we're always trying to figure out what's the fundamental underlying neuropsychological phenomenon. Like, so for example, meditation can be, there are multiple things happening when you're meditating. One thing is relaxation, right? So if you say that meditation lowers your blood pressure, well, how do you know it isn't just relaxation that's lowering your blood pressure? is the meditation is some other aspect of meditation an important component of it that's leading to the decreased blood pressure? How did you control for that? What was your intervention that was relaxation but not some other component of meditation? Or is it the introspection? Or is it something to do with your mood? Or what? I don't know. I don't know what it is about meditation that is ever being studied. There was a review article. This may be what you're referring to on the SGU, maybe 6 months or a year ago. We were talking about a review article that looked at all of the meditation research and said we can't really come to any conclusions about this because it doesn't really drill down to the fundamental components. It doesn't define meditation consistently, and therefore you can't even really look at the research and draw any reliable conclusions. And that's what I find. Like every week there's a study, meditation does this, meditation does that, and it's almost never controlled in any meaningful way where you could say what is it about what that person's doing that's having an effect on what you're measuring. So the science I find almost worthless.
Well, I agree with you. I think that, if you're trying to say that it's lowering blood pressure, that is a super far-fetched claim. And obviously I don't think there's any studies to prove that. But the thing I guess I would say about meditation that's useful is that if you're taking a second and whatever kind of meditation you're doing, whether it be just, a guided meditation or something where you're focusing on something or silencing the mind. And granted, I am not a meditator. I wish I was. I'm just talking purely from something that within the last 6 months to a year, I've kind of reflected on a lot because I'll get in these states where I don't feel like I am the conscious observer. I'm just flowing through the motions and it's really annoying. And so with meditation, I think, granted, like I said, I'm not that good at it. I think that if you're able to sit down and just kind of like watch your thoughts arise and pay attention to what's going on there, at least you're taking a minute to reflect on what the hell's going on in this existing. Because most people, they get stuck in these cycles, wake up, go home, go to work, go to the gym, whatever it is. And they're not even aware of these, and then they think that free will is a thing, and they're not even aware of like 6 months that they just had, and then that turns into 2 years, and then that turns into 10 years, and pretty soon, your life flashed before your eyes, and you don't even know where it went. And that's why I find meditation could be useful, but I'm not that good at it, so I can't even speak to you from personal experience.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's another component of it that I'm very curious about. Is it just that you're reflecting for a moment? You're taking a stress reduction because you're getting out of the rat race of your day, right, of your week. You're saying, all right, this is some me time, or I'm not going to do anything but relax or think about my day, or whatever it is you do when you're meditating. Definitely, it's easy to see how there would be some benefit to that just psychologically. But I worry that there's a lot of window dressing to meditation that's worthless, and
Absolutely.
that it's not really getting to what it is that people are doing that's actually helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just like, just as a comparable example, it's like with a diet, like a specific diet. It, like, for example, with this keto phase that everybody's going through, it's like when you look at the keto diet, there's 2 ways of doing the keto diet. You can do it in a healthy way that's like has some sort of scientific, backing on it, and you're not just eating fast food like bacon and you're just, what I mean? Or you can do it the other way where it's like you're just putting cheese and bacon and all these things together, and it's just a really unhealthy version of that, but maybe you're still in ketosis or whatever. And so, but it's the same thing. It's like people tend to find something that's a fad thing, whether it be yoga, meditation, whatever it is. And they don't invest the time in actually looking into what it is, or having a teacher, which is always something useful, like going to a professional. It's kind of like in your book, you talk about with evolution. I'm pretty sure it was in your book. Maybe it was something that you were saying on a talk. I don't know. But you're talking about how these people that study evolution have gone to school for 10 years or whatever it is, and then you have someone that is maybe they're good at fixing TVs and they're saying evolution isn't true. You know what I mean? It's like if you want to like learn about meditation, maybe you should talk to someone that can explain it. I wouldn't be the person to talk to, you know what I mean? But maybe there is someone that can talk to you about why it's beneficial, and it's not about lowering blood pressure, but it's about being more aware of the things that you're doing in your life. And
yeah, but I want to know what's really real, right? That's like the goal of the book. You brought up a lot of things where I think there's a lot of confusion in the public because of what I call false specificity. So like people say, oh, yoga is healthy. Is it that yoga is healthy, or is exercise healthy and yoga is just one form of exercise? Have you controlled for just exercise? And there's nothing magical about yoga. It's exactly the same thing. Or like, does this diet work or does that diet work? It turns out that what works is dieting. It doesn't matter what the diet is. If you're paying attention to what you're eating, you're thinking about your eating. So most people eat, they don't really think about how much they're eating, and they underestimate their calories, they overeat because they're not paying attention. Paying attention to what you're eating is one component that will help you lose weight, at least in the short term. Doesn't really work long term unless you do other strategies. But it almost doesn't matter what you do. It's just the fact that you're doing something that has a non-specific effect, but you can't conclude from that the specific diet has a specific benefit unless you control those details, control those variables. It's like saying yoga may be no better than other exercise. One diet may be better than anything you do where you're paying attention to what you're eating. Meditation may be no better than any time you take time out of your hectic day to just reflect on your life, or playing a video game, or reading a book. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they say specifically, but the thing is, meditation proponents make specific claims that have not been validated by research. Like you need to do transcendental meditation or this kind of meditation. You need to be doing this specific thing. It's like, yeah, but that specific thing hasn't been researched to the point where you could say that that's the component that works above and beyond doing something else that shares other features with it, but not that specific feature. Like, if I spend 20 minutes playing a relaxing video game, maybe that has the same benefit as meditation. You don't know until you start controlling for those variables and questioning everything. Yeah. But yeah, it's too easy to fall into the conclusion that, oh, this specific intervention works. So, and then make up some hand-waving magical explanation for the specific window dressing details that may be completely irrelevant to the effect that you're perceiving. But that's the kind of question that science endeavors to answer. Let's break it apart. This is the reductionist approach, right? Often gets criticized, but this is actually how science succeeds. You break things apart into their component parts, and you think about, have we really gotten down to the fundamental pieces, or can we break it down even further? And then you try to control those variables and test them, and then you put it back together, and you could really, oh, this is the thing that matters. What matters is that you're estimating your caloric intake, not the calories, not your macronutrient ratio. That doesn't seem to matter. So now I don't have to waste time pursuing some specific diet. I can have just a generally healthful, diet and focus on the parts of it that work. The weighing myself regularly, estimating my caloric intake, portion control, whatever, those things that have been shown to be effective, and not waste my time on the keto diet or the paleo diet or the South Beach diet. That's all nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's actual scientific evidence to show that the keto diet has efficacy in certain things. Like there's been proof in the 20s, they studied that for epilepsy, I believe, but that has nothing to do with losing weight. So, but regardless of that, I wanted to ask you, and just to point out, I totally agree with you. I think that the problem with a lot of these things is that it gets tribal mentality, and people just cling on to whatever their group is. And then all of a sudden it's like with yoga, it's like yoga is life. And then you have these people over here that are like, no, Pilates is life. And it just becomes this thing. And instead of just taking the nuance from it and trying to, like, you know, I eat a specific way because I have Crohn's disease, but I could not label it. I mean, you know what I mean? I couldn't say it's paleo because there's things that I eat that aren't paleo. And I couldn't say that it's, but what it is the thing that works for my illness. So, but anyways, I wanted to ask you, you know, do you believe in free will?
So, yeah, I don't think there's a yes or no question to that. It depends on how you define it.
Sure.
I think in a purely, metaphysical way, you have to say that if you define free will as the ability to transcend the laws of physics operating in your brain, then no. You know, obviously we have our brains are following the laws of physics, but we have free will to the extent that we can reflect on our thought processes and we can make decisions. Okay. Right? There may be things that are influencing those decisions. Those decisions are the result of physical forces operating in our heads. But if you define free will as the ability to self-reflect and make decisions, then yes, we do have free will. And you might argue that's an illusion. But again, that's sort of the matrix argument where you say, what if we're living in a fake world? It's like, well, there's no way. It's real to us. Yeah. It's real enough to us that, and there's no way to get out of it, right? There's no way to get out of our stream of consciousness, to get out of our brain. We are our brain, you know? Yeah. So there's no way to be anything else or to know the world through any other mechanism other than your brain. And so there you go. Within that context, yes, we have free will as much as a biological brain can have free will. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about Sam Harris's arguments on this.
Which specifically?
Well, I mean, because Sam Harris definitely doesn't think that. I mean, he doesn't think that we even have the like. Like you're saying, it's more of an illusion. We don't even have the real mechanisms to say yes or no, because at the point that we say yes or no, according to some studies, I think it's like 40 or 50% of people being watched with an fMRI, which I don't know if that's a very high percentage rate, but you can test up to like 6 seconds before someone makes a conscious decision. So
but only 60% of the time.
Right. Is it 60?
Yeah, like 40% is like barely a signal peaking up over the noise.
Yeah, so that's what I thought too. It seemed like it was a pretty low percentage.
But that means 40% of the time, which is like just barely better than a coin flip. Whatever subconscious processing seems to be deciding left, you're still choosing right. Right?
Yeah, so it's almost
mean?
like
what does that mean? Yeah,
it's almost like maybe they were just 60%. Because if the odds are only 50-50, you know what I mean? But right. So, but do you think that consciousness arises at the brain?
Oh, I think totally. Our consciousness is 100% what the brain does, right? It's a process of the brain. There's no evidence that it's anything else.
I think it's really strange that this is even a debate. You know what I mean? It's like...
I mean, you have to be a science denier to say that it's a debate. I mean, every way you look at it, right? Yeah, I mean, that's what I call neuroscience denial. That's what it is. It's neuroscience denial. The fact is, we are only conscious to the extent that our brain is functioning. And if I alter your brain's functioning, you know this, you took drugs. You take drugs, it alters the biology of your brain. It can alter every aspect of your consciousness. I can take a piece out of your brain and alter your personality. There's nothing
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and then I can't
someone gets Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And their brain stops functioning correctly, and then all of a sudden what happens to that part of the consciousness? Does that go into a different realm?
Your brain cells go away, your memory goes away.
Right.
And I turn off your brain, I turn off your consciousness. It's not just a correlation. You know, we could say every way that you would predict causation, it's predicted by the brain causing consciousness, right? The consciousness is what the brain does. It's the brain in action. There's, I think, no way around that conclusion. There's no way you could get around that conclusion.
So that being said, then, Mick West and I, last night, were talking about artificial intelligence. And this was a question that I asked him, was whether or not he thought that consciousness arose at the brain. And he said that he never cared to think about it, doesn't have an answer. But I found that to be really interesting because he has a lot of concerns with AI coming into being, and if it's going to be conscious and aware. And I wanted to get your opinion on this because I don't really think about AI very much. But after talking with him last night, it's like, when I think of consciousness arising at the brain, it's like a byproduct of our biology as a way for survival almost. So that's how I think of it. And if that's what it is, it's almost like if AI becomes like what we consider to be conscious, I mean, then they're not going to have the same motivations behind whatever consciousness is, because all of our consciousness is just basically to pass on copies of the genes. So I don't know if AI's coming into awareness, if that's even going to, I guess I was wondering what your opinion was on this. Do you think that we'll be able to replicate what consciousness is, being self-aware and, being the, conscious creatures in a computer?
There's no reason why a computer that mimics what the human brain does wouldn't be conscious in the same way that we are. Right. So I think, we'll make artificial intelligence as soon as we get to the point where we could replicate the brain's functionality, that whatever that is will be conscious the same way that we are. I don't think that machines like computers will spontaneously generate consciousness. I don't think it's a matter of just being powerful enough. I think it has to be designed to be conscious, right? By whatever process we use. That could be an evolutionary process if we allow software to evolve, or it could be, if we replicate the brain without really fully understanding it, that may be another pathway. Or we could top down design it by understanding the connections, the processes, the algorithms that make self-aware consciousness. And then it will be whatever it is we make it to be, right? It won't necessarily, be monstrous or decide to kill everybody or whatever. It could be whatever we want it to be. I don't think it'll come into being, though, until we deliberately create it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I agree with you 100% on that. I just don't see, when I think of what consciousness is and how it is just a response to biology, I just don't see how it's going to be, because when you think of it like it's going to just come into its own awareness and all of a sudden it's just going to be there, that's like metaphysical, it seems like to me. But I guess with you being a materialist, and if we were to be able to create machines that were self-aware, Mick's biggest concern with this is that they're going to not have our interest in mind, and we might, they might kill us or we might go extinct, which to me doesn't really matter, because I think of it like, if it's just the next stage of consciousness, if this is, if we create artificial intelligence that's self-aware, has all the same functionality that a human brain does, and that's what that's like the next phase of our evolution, possibly. That's way better, and it's the same thing, right? I mean, it's not like if we go extinct, this is going to like be the end of something, I mean, just because it's the end of us doesn't mean it's the end of civilization or whatever.
I mean, there's just too many unknowns to even speculate about that now. I mean, first of all, I think on the one hand, like, we're realizing that we can develop so-called AI functionality. We have AI right now. It's not self-aware general AI, but it's specific AI. So it could do, we're getting really good at making, algorithms that can learn, that can adapt, that could do the things we need to do without getting anywhere close to consciousness. So that's why I don't think we need to create software that's conscious until we want to, until we try to specifically. And we'll probably be able to go accomplish everything we want to accomplish without doing that. So then we have to ask ourselves, well, why would we do it? I think we're going to do it primarily because we're trying to understand how our brain works. My prediction is
physics.
AI will be our attempt at replicating the brain, and understanding the brain and researching the brain, and we'll build a model of it in virtually or in silicon in order to understand it, and that thing will be conscious, because if it does replicate the brain. the human brain. And then if that's how we got there, then we have an artificial human, right? It's not just going to be its own thing.
Yeah.
If we build it to be a human, to model a human's brain, to some extent, it'll be a human.
Which is way better because it's not, it doesn't have kidney failure and heart disease. And
we don't necessarily have to put it in a robot that has like self-autonomy and the ability to replicate itself and, weapons attached to it or whatever. I think there's some pretty obvious safety precautions that we can put into place. You know what I mean? So I think we have to almost go out of our way to make killer robots.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we won't. Doesn't mean
I was going to say we still split the atom.
But I mean, I think we could take things one step at a time and just be thoughtful about what we're creating. Mm-hmm. And we could make everything we want to make in terms of functionality without creating something that would threaten human civilization. And the other thing to think about is the fact that by the time we get there, to the point where we're making artificial brains, we're going to be merging with our technology. It's going to be us.
Yeah. It's going to be
the idea that it's going to be 100% biological humans and then machines that threaten us is maybe completely false. We may be this one and the same thing. That artificial intelligence may be attached to my brain. I may become it. Yeah. So I'm actually not worried about that, even though that's something that worries thoughtful people.
I tend to take the same route that like Steven Pinker takes. It's like, here's what I think. I think that the reason that we're so afraid of it is the same reason that we're so afraid of anything that could possibly kill us is because we're always worried about passing on copies of the genes. It's just a biological inevitability that we're going to be concerned about dying. So I think it's just built into our human nature to be worried about these things, but we'll never know what the next thing is going to be. And I mean, there's a lot of other things at hand, I think, that we should be concerned about, like asteroids, EMPs, nuclear crazy presidents, like whatever it may be, So I don't know. I just think that this seems like in the intellectual circles, it's being talked about a lot in a very fearful way. And I kind of think it's bizarre in a way, just because it's just, it could be great, it could be terrible, but either way, it's going to happen. I mean, you can't put the brakes on it. So, but I find it to be pretty.
It is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you run a podcast, Skeptics Guide to the Universe, and you've also written a really awesome book, by the way.
Thanks.
I kind of brushed past it in the beginning, but it's so. How long did it take you to write that thing? I
mean, the actual sitting down writing was about 6 months.
That's it? My goodness.
But then it was another 6 months to edit it, with the editor, which was a great process, but that was very time consuming as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another 6 months for just all of the publisher stuff that they had to do, like the artwork and the copy editing and all that stuff. But that's a long process. That was but we weren't starting from scratch. Like this was after I had already been writing about this for 10 years and writing literally thousands of articles. And so I had a lot of source material to start with, but still, the book is its own thing. It has one flow, narrative structure, et cetera. So it was a lot of new material, and any old material had to be rewritten so that it flowed as a book,
Yeah. Let me ask you this. As a skeptical person, someone who, is always, you're trying to be rational and objective about most things, obviously, and everybody has their biases. Do you think that you're more biased to just disbelieve any conspiracy out there? Is there any conspiracies that you have questions about? I mean, I'm just wondering because I think that it's like, I mean, when I look at conspiracies and stuff like that, most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, I'm just like, come on, like vaccines, come on. You know what I mean? But then there's always like those little well, that is weird, like with the JFK thing. I'm not saying that I don't believe the official story, but there is weird aspects of it. And it's easier to look back in time and think that things are weird, you know what I mean, after the fact. Mm-hmm. But I was just wondering if there's anything where you look at it and you're just like, could it be, or, you know?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on what you're talking about. So um, I take each conspiracy claim as its own thing,
Yeah.
but informed in a couple of ways. So I think that small conspiracies are common.
Oh, yeah.
If you tell me, any conspiracy that could be hatched in one boardroom of one corporation, absolutely, right? In one person's office, in one person's kitchen, anything like that, then sure, these small conspiracies that would, that are only a dozen or fewer people really need to be involved, or,
Right.
all with one alignment of interests over a certain confined period of time. Absolutely. And then you go from there. The bigger the conspiracy gets, the inherently less likely it is. Right.
Yeah.
Now, most of the conspiracy theories that we're talking about are what we call grand conspiracies that involve hundreds or thousands of people, or people with far-reaching power spanning generations, multinational, multiple administrations. Everyone seems to be in on it, right? Those are inherently so improbable that they could not exist.
Yeah.
But more important than the claim itself is the process that people use to get there, right? Like, this is a good general skeptical principle, is that we are concerned with the process, not the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is using a valid thought process, logic, et cetera, and arrives at the conclusion that there is a conspiracy, even a reasonably big one, if the process is valid, I would take it seriously, right? If they're looking at logic and evidence, et cetera. But the grand conspiracies are supported by conspiracy thinking, invalid thought process that looks at things like, just to use the example you were giving, it starts with like, oh, that's weird. And then say, well, that's weird, therefore there must be something going on. No, stop right there. That's the incorrect process. There's something weird because there's something weird about everything.
Yeah, no kidding.
No matter what you look at, you will find weird patterns and weird coincidences and stuff that doesn't make sense, because the world is complicated and we are pattern-seeking storytelling animals that are trying to look at all the chaos and to weave narratives out of it. And you could look at any historical event and find all kinds of crazy things that appear to line up or don't make sense, or that. And if you are using a conspiracy mindset to make sense of it, you can force fit that to anything. So if that's your process, that shit looked weird to you, that's not compelling. That is not compelling at all. And you need to get out more, right? You need to understand how reality works a little bit better, understand things like data mining and confirmation bias, like how our brains construct conspiracy theories. And if you're just sort of following passively along the conspiracy psychology, I'm just not impressed by that. That does not lead to a compelling claim that there is a conspiracy. Right. So that's how I approach that. But, if there is, even an implausible conspiracy, but there's real evidence for it and the thought process is valid, I'll look at that. I'll take it seriously. Weird stuff does happen occasionally. Right. I mean, that's the other thing, is that unlikely things happen given enough time and opportunity.
Yeah. And also, I mean, when I think of, even if, like, okay, let's take an example like Monsanto. Okay. I don't think Monsanto is this crazy, like, I don't think that they're sitting in bunkers together plotting out the end of humanity, but let's pretend that they are. I don't think that if a corporation ended up having like, let's say GMOs, there was evidence that GMOs gave people cancer. And obviously there's no evidence for that, so I don't want people listening to this to think that I think that, but let's say that there was evidence for that. It doesn't mean that they tried to do that. It could very well be that they just came out with something that was a better farming technique, and then all of a sudden, 20 years down the road, they find out, oh shit, this is causing a negative side effect that we had no idea was going to happen. I mean, can you even really fault that on the corporation? That's a real question.
Yeah, but so would I believe that a corporation would hide knowledge that their product caused cancer? Yeah, the tobacco industry, right? That's what industries do.
And they market the fact that, they've put billions of dollars into marketing adverse,
yes. So they launched a campaign of doubt and confusion to try to muddy the waters and hide that fact, et cetera. So absolutely. And that's the kind of conspiracy I believe in. Corporations exist to make profit in our capitalistic system. Right. And I do think I don't think it's black and white. I don't think everyone is a mustache twisting villain. I think it's more that they convince themselves that the data is what the data is, right? And they may be, or that, they sort of buy their own bullshit at a certain point, or they think, well, people are making a free choice, so whatever. They find a way to convince themselves that what they're doing is all right.
It's easier to lie to yourself than it is to anybody else.
Absolutely. Or they think, oh, the deck is stacked against us, so we have to cut corners in order to, what do you expect us to do? We have to turn a profit or whatever. Or they're just individuals under a lot of pressure, they just crack under pressure and they make bad decisions or selfish decisions, And yes, there are actual psychopaths out there who are evil and will just do horrible things. And so they're thrown into the mix as well. So it's complicated. People are complicated. People do all sorts of things. So I absolutely am always willing to believe that a corporation is acting in its own self-interest against the environment or public health or fairness or transparency. Absolutely. That's my default sort of assumption, which is why I think we need to have careful regulations and careful oversight, especially on critical industries. Right? So I don't believe Monsanto's claims about anything, but if you look at the whole picture, there's reasonable government oversight and there's, independent scientific research, and, we could look at the evidence and make our own judgments about whether or not GMOs are risky or not.
And have nuance, because some of them might be risky and some of them might not be risky.
You have to make individual decisions about individual cultivars, individual GMOs. There's nothing inherently risky about the technology that I think anybody has been able to successfully argue. And we have lots of research, like looking at 20 years of feeding animals GMOs, and they're without a hint of any problem.
Yeah,
There's
but
lots
also
of reassuring evidence out there.
But I think that the other thing with that is, to be objective, it's like you have to look at every aspect of it too, because if you're making GMOs that are enabling you to, spray more chemicals and that gets into the environment, that potentially could be a negative side effect of that, though.
Yeah, but you have to look at exactly what has happened. So that's a specific application of GMOs, first of all. And it's not just GMOs, it's farming, right? You have to look at all aspects of how we are farming. Yeah. But it turns out that, GMOs that have insecticides have actually reduced the amount of insecticides that we're using. Yeah. And those that allow for the use of herbicides have increased those herbicides, but have decreased other herbicides that were in fact more toxic. So it's more, you have to go down deeper. It's actually more complicated. The end result has actually been pretty positive. Yeah. When you really look at the overall effect. But even if it were negative, what that means, we're using it wrong. We're using that specific application incorrectly, and we need to be more thoughtful about how we are dealing with the pest problem, whether it's weeds or insects or whatever. That's a complicated issue, and GMOs are one piece of that puzzle. To say that it's the fault of GMOs that we're spraying pesticides or herbicides is ridiculous. Yeah. It's just a complete misunderstanding of farming, of modern farming.
It's actually misunderstanding too, because isn't it like the like Monsanto's genetically modified stuff it has the insecticides built in, so you don't have to spray. Is that
the
right?
BT? Yeah, the BT like corn or BT whatever has the BT insecticide built in, and that's the same insecticide that is allowed in organic farming. This is like generally considered to be a safe insecticide. And it reduces the applications of insecticides that get into the environment and that are more dangerous.
Yeah, so it's probably more of a net positive than anything.
Huge net positive, absolutely. Yeah. So you just have to look at specific applications and how they're used. But to get back to the original question, so again, it's like you have to look at, how the corporations, what the oversight is, what the evidence is, what claims are they making, and like there's plenty of instances like people say, oh, you're just a shill for corporations, you believe whatever they tell you. No, I don't. I've been massively critical of the petrochemical industry for denying global warming, of the tobacco industry for denying the link between tobacco and cancer. When industry is wrong, we totally hammer them on it. But industry is not always wrong. Sometimes the science happens to be to their advantage. It's not always to their disadvantage. They're not always lying. Sometimes the facts, they're just taking advantage of the facts as they are. They don't need to distort them. But then, and even then, I don't trust them. I trust independent science. I don't trust the pharmaceutical company. I know they are always cutting corners and trying to manipulate things to their own advantage. It doesn't mean that their drugs don't work. I mean, you have to look at all the evidence. It's not always one simplistic story, but people get this simplistic narrative, whatever that is. Either it's corporations are always evil, or those environmentalists are crazy, or whatever it is. Pick your narrative. You have your cardboard mentality. Yeah, you have your tribe mentality with simplistic villains and heroes. Nope, the world is complicated. Everyone thinks they're the hero. The world is a complicated place. You have to absorb it in all of that complexity and try to make some kind of rational sense of it. And it's not easy, but don't be seduced by the simplistic narrative.
Yeah, totally. I love it. I think that that's so important because nuance is like the biggest thing that we're lacking right now. And it's getting worse, it seems like, because I mean, especially after this last political election, it's like the country is so divided over the dumbest stuff. And then, I mean, I just think that there's
over some important stuff too. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I agree with you, but being divided isn't going to be the way to fix it. I mean, it's like pointing fingers and yelling is never going to be the way that we get this resolved. And I just think that I understand what you're saying. It's over important stuff, but there's got to be a better way that we handle it. There just has to be. And
I agree.
Yeah, I think that right now it seems like, especially with, it's like if you say that you're not a Republican, then all of a sudden you're a hippie leftist who thinks that, all these things. And if you're, like not a liberal, then all of a sudden you're a Nazi and
there's fascist. Yeah. No, I agree. I think the middle has to reassert itself. And I think that we are in a period where things have moved to the extremes to some extent, but I think it's more that the extremes are more vocal. And I think that's another social media phenomenon.
Absolutely. It gives
I think there's the silent majority in the middle who are moderate. Yeah. And I'm seeing signs that, more people are like saying, oh, to hell with both extremes. Yeah. Can't we just have some reason and sense in the middle? Let's just do what makes sense and forget this tribalism crap. Yeah. So hopefully that will gain momentum. And I'm trying to encourage that. Yes, let's re-embrace nuance and thoughtfulness. And I just wrote an article on my blog that called Against Ideology, which is all about this. Let's get rid of ideology and tribalism and partisanship and just do what makes sense for a while, right? We need a break. We need a break from this tribalism to like start to get things working again,
Yeah, I know. It's really, I mean, I just reactivated or started a Facebook account. I hadn't had one for a while. And same thing with Twitter. I didn't have one for so long. And I just started one like within the last few weeks. And it's just amazing to me. I like see why I got off of them because it's so, you can't like post anything about science or anything about anything without it breaking into this like feud of opinions. And it's like, guys, let's just settle down, take a breath and, talk about this in a calm, objective way. If you disagree with it, then let's talk about why. The discussion needs to happen though, because I think that especially with I don't obviously know what your political stance is. And I am not a huge political person, but right now, it seems like what Trump is doing is utilizing tribalism in the utmost way. He's like able to take and just make people team oriented, and it's just so obvious when you see it. It's like he's really good at it. It's not, I don't know if it's intentional or if he's just really convincing or what, but he's very good at making people divisive, you know. It's so weird. So, but I think it's really interesting though, and I definitely hope that we can get the country back on track, you know. So, but so I guess I think it's been about an hour now, and and so I really appreciate you doing this with me, and there was so much pleasure. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I wanted to talk to you about, but do you want to talk a little bit about what A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is and how you guys broadcast?
Yeah, so the Skeptic's Guide is a weekly science and critical thinking podcast. We started in 2005. We just published our 700th episode. Yeah, we come out every week. It's a long format show, about an hour and a half each week. And we go over science news, critical thinking items. We have a fun game I call Science or Fiction that everybody likes, and other bits in there. And we often do interviews as well. So that you can find that on iTunes. Just search for The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and you'll find it. And as you said, we just published a book by the same name that came out in October. And
oh wow, that just came out in October.
Yeah.
That's so funny because I just stumbled across you and that like maybe 2 weeks ago, and just have a little bit. Yeah, and I breezed through the book. I mean, it's a very long book, but I breezed through it because it was so great.
Oh, thanks.
But I guess I didn't look at the publishing date. That's so funny. It's just weird how sometimes things happen.
Yeah, you lose a sense like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're trying to do other things. You know, we have a pretty active Facebook page. We produce occasional videos, do live streaming events. We have a science fiction show we call Alpha Quadrant 6. That's this focuses more on the fun science fiction stuff. And we're trying to always do more. You know, to always more social media engagement. Anything we can do to get science and critical thinking out there.
Well, that's so great. I think that my wife and I produce music, so we're in like the electronic music scene. So that whole culture is very either woo woo or conspiracy minded, or you know, like I would say 85% of my friends are somewhere in those lines, and it's really cool that I started this podcast, and I think that it's able to, you know, like my net effect on people that I know, it seems like it's been pretty positive and makes people kind of think maybe a little bit deeper about because when you're stuck in these like little circles, it's really easy to just continue thinking, you know, that everything is, you know, either a conspiracy or whatever. And then you don't really hear the alternatives very often, which is what you were talking about with social media, you know? So it's really easy to get stuck in these little tribes. And I think it's great the podcasting is such a great medium to bring voices like yours out there. So,
yeah, I think it has been a boon to science communication and critical thinking, also to nonsense, but that's why we have to be too. It's the free marketplace of ideas, so we have to promote, you know, science and reason.
One more question really fast, and I will try to get off with you. What do you think about this like silencing of Alex Jones?
So Alex Jones still has a website. He can still produce his show and you know, and get it out there. I don't think that anyone owes him a platform. Right. And you know, I think outlets like Facebook and Twitter they're free to have standards as long as they are transparent about what those standards are, and that their standards are quality control and not just discriminating against certain opinions or beliefs over others. Right. And if they're saying, yeah, this guy doesn't meet our standards for quality because he's demonstrably lying and committing fraud or whatever it is. I mean, if you can't say that we don't want fraud on our network, then, you know, how can you have any standards at all? Right. So I think I have no problem with it as long as they're applying it in a fair and transparent way that's based on reasonable standards and not just discrimination.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, I mean, the Sandy Hook thing, it's like, how can you even, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you're from Connecticut, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. Yesterday I recorded. I know I've told you this like 5 times now, but I recorded that podcast with Nick West yesterday, and we uploaded the podcast last night. And I got sent because we had mentioned Sandy Hook briefly in it, and I just said, no matter what you think, maybe you should be considerate of the victims, whether or not you think that the victims are real. So always go in their favor. And I got this like storm of conspiracy comments on the video and from people who are Sandy. I didn't even know,
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't, it's just crazy. I mean, I don't understand how that you can go and you can like read about this kid's childhood and everything's transparent with the whole thing. It's just
totally. I mean, I have friends who live in Sandy Hook whose kids were at the school at the time of the shooting.
Right.
One of my friends was at the school when the shooting occurred. And I'm several towns over, my co-host and my brother Bob lives in Newtown, very close to Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
The number of people that those families who lost children or who lost people, the number of families that they touch is massive. I would have to be part of the conspiracy. That, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So many, tens of thousands of people would have to be part of the conspiracy. There is no way you could fake a school of children who never existed. If you think about it for even 2 minutes, it makes absolute. So that's why I say, what thought process are you using to come up with that conspiracy?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not a rational process.
Well, and like by saying that something like that is a conspiracy, you're saying that school shootings can't happen. Every mass shooting can't happen. It's like, what? It does. It's not. It's so
all
illogical.
False flags. Yeah, that means you have to believe that it never happens, right?
Yeah. So I appreciate. I'm not going to take up any more of your time, but how can people find you really quick on Twitter and all that jazz?
Yeah, the Skeptics Guide. That's our pretty much universal
search.
handle.
Okay, great. And do you have any talks that you're giving up anytime soon or anything like that? I know.
We just came to the end of our book tour, so we kind of missed all of our live events.
Okay.
We do have we're starting to put together our event schedule for next year for 2019. But if you go to our website, the Skeptics Guide, you'll see upcoming events there. We have one in Pennsylvania in April. We're hosting a conference in July in New York. And then there'll be some other ones on the schedule as well.
Well, it has been good. I am so stoked I got to meet you and talk to you because I love the book and I love everything that you're doing. And I've listened. I didn't mention this in the podcast and I told myself I was going to, but the debate that you had with the Proof of Heaven guy was just, that was so good. And that book is just, I don't even get it, but it doesn't matter. So thank you again. And I really hope I can connect with you again soon. And I hope that you have a good, book release and everything. I hope everything goes great. So,
all right. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. That was my interview with Dr. Steve Novella. Be sure to check out his book, A Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, available wherever books are sold. And thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. We've got a ton of great guests coming up. I am so thankful that I get to have conversations like this and I get to have them and you guys listen. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Have an amazing week and I'll see you soon. All right, later.